Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about how to approach the first Common App essay prompt. If you're thinking about writing this prompt and how to brainstorm for it, some good and bad examples, some breakdowns. If you don't know who I am, my name is Naman. I'm a first-year medical student at Washington University. I've been editing essays for the past 5 years on and off, and I'm really excited to just share what I've learned, things to do, things not to do, and yeah, let's just get started. So the first prompt, if you haven't read it, is some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful that they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, please share your story. Because this is the first breakdown that I'm doing, I just want to mention that these Common App prompts are kind of for you to brainstorm a little bit more and not something that you have to stick to really well. And so if you kind of feel like you have a background or identity or interest or talent that is really meaningful, this is probably a good prompt to choose. But if you don't feel like that, you should just choose another prompt or choose the prompt that you can write about anything. And sometimes people don't feel like they have a really strong background, identity, interest, or talent. I certainly did. So this is not some prompt that I chose. But the first thing you want to think about is, okay, what are the exact words they're using? So do you have a background? Background might be cultural, you might be an immigrant, it might be a religion, it might be a race, it might be a community that you're a part of. It could be pretty much anything, but is there something that precedes you? Is there something that kind of defines you that you've been part of as a community? Are you part of a church group? Are you part of a volunteer group? Um, is are you part of a are you from a country that's not the US, Are you from an underrepresented area? These are all things that could be your background. And usually background is something that you didn't choose but has defined you a lot. Identity is also kind of a term that is really difficult to define. But if you're part of the LGBTQ community, some people think that, or believe that that's part of a intrinsic part of their personality or identity. If you're part of um, any sort of group, if you're part of race, religion, etc., those are all parts of your identity. If you have an interest that's really, really taken over your life and kind of defines you in a really important way, then that's probably a good thing to write about here. And when I say interest, it's not something that you're just casually interested in. It has to be something that you've really pursued and you've kind of engaged with, you've done projects in, you might have done research with, you might have asked people questions, you might have won something in a competition, but those are all interests that you've taken to the next level. If you just have a budding interest but you haven't really done anything in it, it's probably not a great idea to write about this. And the final thing is a talent. And a talent could be, you juggled in all 50 states. Or it could be, you like to dance or you like to sing. But those are all talents. And if it's something that, has really defined your life, and it's not just something that you've kind of done here and there, but you can actually talk about and something that people are really interested in, then that's probably a good thing to write about in the story. And a good litmus test that once time my counselor told me is that, if you could talk about any of these things to somebody else over a coffee conversation for like 20-30 minutes and they're just really interested and they keep asking you questions about it, like how has that influenced you, what have you done in it, if you're talking about an interest and you're really interested in, I don't know, early language acquisition in babies, and that's something that's really interested in you and you're able to talk about it to, I don't know, your friend or your parent over 30 minutes and they keep asking you questions and they're really interested, then that's probably a good thing to write about for this type of prompt. Okay, so I'm going to be showing you some things that I kind of find interesting about this. So first thing is you want to have an introduction, and how I would approach the introduction is kind of starting with a hook that grabs the reader's attention. This is true for most essays, like a vivid description, an interesting anecdote, a thought-provoking question, and then kind of introduce what is your answer to the question, what is so meaningful to you, and why is it significant. So start out with a story or just a description. I usually don't really like asking a question, but kind of ask yourself the question, what is the story that you want to share? You can start with that. So I'm going to show you a good example of an intro and maybe not so good of an intro. And so the first good example of an intro is woodworking, and kind of the experience that this student has with woodworking. So, I remember the day that my father took me to his woodworking shop for the first time. The smell of sawdust and the sound of machines were overwhelming, but that what really captivated me was the sight of my dad creating something beautiful out of a block of wood. That day marked the beginning of my passion for woodworking, which has become an integral part of my identity. So you see that, this is an interest, but it's not like a very common interest that a lot of students have. And so you can kind of see that this story has kind of already marked itself from the very first two sentences, which is that woodworking has been a part of his identity, his or her identity. And you can kind of see like the first moment. And so this is a really interesting anecdote. We can kind of see specific details, a memory that this person has, and how it's really overwhelming, and how that has kind of kindled a passion for woodworking. And we're gonna kind of guess that this is going to result in other facets of his or her life being changed. And so if you can kind of start out a essay where you're kind of answering the question really well and kind of leading to a much more interesting, bigger story about your life, those are usually really great introductions. Okay, here's an example of something that doesn't do as well. My name is Jane and I love basketball. I've been playing it since I was a kid and I'm really good at it. I think it's important to share this with you because it shows how dedicated and hardworking I am. So, there's a couple of things I don't like about this. First thing is it's usually not a good idea to kind of talk to the reader like that. You want to show things, and you don't want to really call out the reader. It feels kind of uncomfortable for the person who's reading it. You don't need to include your name, so you don't need to do that. Um, you kind of want to show that you love basketball. What do you love about it? And what is the story? You want to start out with an anecdote. You kind of want to use um, anecdotes and stories to kind of open up your essay and make somebody really interested in what you're writing. It also makes it a lot easier if you have kind of a more unique hobby. So you can kind of see like it's a little bit harder to talk about basketball than woodworking, just because this is automatically like I'm curious about how woodworking has been an integral part of your identity. Not that you can't write. I think you could write a beautiful essay about basketball, but if you are writing a beautiful essay about basketball, it's kind of important to have a lesson that's not just cliches like basketball has made me dedicated and hardworking. Maybe basketball has influenced your life in other ways, like you've learned the responsibility of showing up on time and how you used to not show up on time, or how you've learned the importance of making passes or not making passes, or the position you have to play has to be agreed upon beforehand and things like that. But ultimately, you kind of want to figure out what is that lesson, what is that unique lesson that you came up with this that other people wouldn't have come up with from that experience. And so a good litmus test again that I have for these types of essays is that if somebody else went through the same exact experiences that you did, would they still have the same takeaway that you did? And so if somebody who plays basketball their whole life, they'd probably also have these takeaways that they're dedicated and hardworking, right? But you can already tell from this thing that somebody who's been through woodworking, two people might have like different outcomes, and you can kind of see like, okay, this is going to be probably a unique essay because they're going to talk about the specific impact that woodworking has had on their identity. And so I don't think two essays would be the same for people who are writing this type of essay, versus I think I could read two very similar essays for somebody writing about basketball and how dedicated and hardworking they are. So try to be specific, try to be personal, use descriptive language, paint a picture of your background, identity, interest, or talent. Don't use cliches, generic statements that don't reveal anything unique about you. All right, so now let's go into the story. This is kind of the bulk of your essay. What is the approach that you're using? Well, you kind of want to provide a detailed account of how this background, identity, interest, talent has shaped you as a person and has influenced your goals, values, and beliefs. You want to use specific examples again. You want to use anecdotes. You want to use experiences that illustrate your point. And if you can do this, then you're A-okay for this essay. So let me show you another good example. If you look at the bottom of my screen here, all right. As I started to spend more time in my dad's woodworking shop, I began to learn the intricacies of the craft. I discovered that it wasn't just about cutting, sanding wood, but it was also about patience, precision, creativity. Started to develop my own style and techniques, and before long, I was making my own furniture and selling it online. More than just a hobby, woodworking has taught me valuable life lessons of perseverance, problem solving, and satisfaction of creating something with my own hands. So you can kind of see that there's a story developing here. You see some interesting things about this person, that they're learning intricacies of this craft. They're learning about cutting and sanding wood. They're learning about how to sell it online, and kind of some valuable life lessons. And this is, again, not a perfect example, because you can kind of guess if you had to improve this essay. Let's say you were an essay editor, you were figuring out, okay, how would I try to improve this? Well, you could give feedback that, this person is still doing a lot of telling, even though they're showing something. So they're still talking about, that it's taught them valuable life lessons, and that they're learning patience, precision, and creativity. But I kind of want to see that in a story. I don't want to see just an explanation. I don't want to have to believe that person. I want to really see it and understand how they're learning about it. So maybe they could talk about something that they really struggled in the craft, and how they had to learn some intricacy of the craft that they didn't know about. Maybe they can talk about how they had to watch a lot of videos or read a lot of books and learn about the intricacies of the craft that they didn't really appreciate before. And maybe they can talk about like the style they developed as a result of all this sorts of architecture and woodworking. And maybe they can talk about exactly what the satisfaction of creating something with their own hands feels like, and why that's so important to them. And maybe they can talk about how they want to use that in the future, and what sorts of things that it's told them. Or maybe they can talk about an uncomfortable seller that they had to encounter, and how they had to like I could see a really great story being written about how somebody wasn't really happy with their woodworking, and so they had to adjust their style to appease other people, or maybe deciding not to. And so you can kind of see how there's a lot of stories that you can tell out of this. And usually when somebody's writing a good essay, they start by telling a lot. The first draft is a lot of telling and not a lot of showing. But the good thing is that you can start to figure out, okay, I know what lessons I learned from this. Now I just have to figure out what were the stories in my life that show that I've learned these lessons. And the more that you can just write and just spit words onto the paper that you think are true, the more you can come up with good ideas and good stories that you're able to communicate about the life lessons that you've learned as a result of your background, identity, interest, talent, etc. Okay, here's the bad example. Basketball has taught me how to be a team player and work hard. I've won a lot of games and gotten a lot of trophies from my skills on the court. So you can kind of see that this is again a little bit more on the vague side. I can kind of tell that anybody who's played basketball will learn these skills, and it's not really unique to this person. And so I don't really know a lot about this person just based on their writing. I don't have a voice. I don't really, and again, you can write a great essay about how basketball has really shaped your life, but it has to tell a lot of specific stories, and it has to have like a little bit of a unique takeaway. What is the takeaway that you specifically got from playing basketball that maybe somebody else who's gone through the same experiences wouldn't have gotten, because they're a different person and they have different takeaways. And so if you can kind of talk about that, then that's a good idea. And always whatever I tell people is you want to focus on the specific. You want to focus on stories. If you're talking about your entire life, that's really difficult to do in an essay. But if you talk about a series of moments that you just that you really remember, those are great essays. And so this is kind of just a general summary of their basketball game. And this is also, you can see, is still like a general summary. But if you can kind of put paragraphs that are just morsels of specific stories and moments of your life that you really remember, those are great essays. And those are things that admission committees can really learn a lot about you from those types of essays. Okay, so again, you want to show, you don't want to tell. You want to use specific details and examples to demonstrate your interest, background, in talent, identity that has influenced your personal and intellectual growth. You don't want to focus only on the superficial aspects of your background, identity, interest, or talent, or list your achievements without really explaining their significance. And sometimes when I see this is people who've won a lot of math competitions or research competitions kind of just talk about their achievements without explaining what they've learned from those achievements, or explaining kind of how that's fitting into the narrative of their life. So if you can do that, you're going to be better than 99% of people writing these types of essays. Okay. I think last takeaway, and then we'll be done with this video. So the last lesson that I have for you is that you want to discuss the lessons you have learned from this experience and how it's impacted your personal growth and development. You want to be honest and introspective and show how the background, identity, or interest or talent has shaped your perspective on life and future goals. So you want to really focus on the lessons you're learning from this, okay? And ideally these are lessons again that you personally take away from these lessons, and maybe somebody else who has had the same experiences would take away different lessons. You want it to be unique to you because of who you are as a person. So the example that is good: woodworking has not only taught me technical skills but a sense of purpose and direction. It has showed me that I'm capable of creating something beautiful and meaningful, that I have a passion for entrepreneurship and design. I hope to use these skills to pursue a career in woodworking and furniture design, and to inspire others to pursue their own passions and dreams. So you can kind of see that this is a little bit more unique in the lessons that they're learning. They're kind of the big lesson that they're learning is kind of that they're capable of creating something beautiful and meaningful. And if I wanted to give feedback to this person, I would tell them that I would focus on one lesson to take away from all of this, which I would say the best lesson is probably that they're able to create something beautiful and meaningful out of something that's just wood, something that's a bare building block, and they can make something that's really appeasing to other people. And that's kind of a beautiful lesson. You can take any of these lessons, that they figured out that they have a passion for entrepreneurship that they didn't know, or that they have a passion for design. But if you can focus on one lesson that's unique to you, you can kind of have this really beautiful story where you're having these parts of your narrative of your life, and you're showing how you've grown as a result of that identity or background or interest or talent. And then finally you can show what is the lesson you've had from all these experiences. In a really great ending, it should be like the reader is gaining the same lesson from just reading the arc of your life that you are getting from writing the essay. And if you can do that, where the reader reads the essay and is like, wow, I just learned that myself, just because I learned your life story. And so I also learned the same lesson that you did. And if you think about it, that's kind of the point of writing and communication and speaking, is that we used to huddle around fires as, ancient times and as cavemen, and you used to tell stories, and whatever would pass on was the stuff that was really interesting, that contained a lot of value. And those things were ultimately stories with lessons in them. And if you can do that in your essay, that's going to be the most captivating to your college admission reader. Okay, this is a bad example, which is that it's taught me to never give up and always strive for excellence. I know I can bring these schools to your college and make a difference. And again, this is not unique enough. This is not something that anybody's going to learn a lot about you. And it's totally okay, again, to write about something that a lot of people are interested in, but it's important to focus on what unique things did you take away from your unique experiences that other people wouldn't have taken away. Whew. All right. So that's a comprehensive video that I have for you on how to answer the first Common App essay prompt. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down below and I'll be happy to get to you. All right. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.